The Saskatchewan Roughriders defeated the Toronto Argonauts over the weekend, and it was a big game, especially for one man who made his first game in the CFL in a little while. Of course, injuries. We're talking about Will Ford, who was released just a week prior by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Now, it seemed like there were gaping holes for him, and especially for a running back. That's what you love. You know, Saskatchewan's got one of the best offensive lines in the league, so they can even make me look good. But what I'm saying, guys, is this. Was this a game that Saskatchewan really showed their true dominance and said, you know what, this is a team that was what they were last year or can be in the future? Or was it just a game because, of course, the Toronto Argonauts, they had a lot of injury woes, a lot of injury problems, that this was just a weakened Argonaut side and the win is a little more embellished than it should be?
I watched the entire game and I thought they dominated all the way through. I think it's a little of both. Toronto definitely has some injuries and they had some holes, and Ford 3 touchdowns, he did fantastic. But what people have to do too is realize that they had the week off after getting beat. Then they had the week off. The coach had 2 or 3 closed door meetings with the players, and I think the players had some meetings and basically said, like, we got to get going here. So defending champs, and let's get it done. So
I think it was a great rebound for the Riders. I think defensively they stepped it up, and that's the most confidence I think we've seen out of that defensive core the entire season. Obviously the running game was working, but at the same time it is the CFL, and we weren't very good through the air. I think Durant only had like 150 yards or 170 yards maybe passing, and I mean, if someone can stop the run, then that puts a lot more pressure on Durant, and whether he can throw the ball or not with that young receiving core, we'll see what happens. But defensively I thought they were great, and whether or not Toronto was beat up, I think they still played.
So but you still give Saskatchewan more credit than the fact that just Toronto was just injured and that's why they took advantage?
Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Edmonton Eskimos. They lost their first regular season game, going 4-1, losing to the Calgary Stampeders. Now, one play that stuck to my mind was the play with about 16 seconds to go in their own end zone just before half. And Chris Jones and the Eskimos wanted to try a few trick plays, and I understand where they're coming from. It makes sense. You need something, a few wrinkles to give yourself an advantage. However, you're pinned in your own end zone with, like I said, 16 seconds to go. You try and end around on a fake punt. They don't get it. Give instant field position to Calgary. They score a touchdown. And if you look at it, if they took away that touchdown off the score, they would have won the game by 3. So, guys, was this a bonehead move by head coach Chris Jones to go gamble at such a point in that game?
absolutely.
It was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was
can you explain, like, what was your thoughts when you saw that play?
The risk and reward to that play was just not there. Like, there was no, even if they would have got to the 20-yard line with 16 seconds left, they still had to go another 30, 40, 50, 60 yards to get into field goal range. Like, they had the wind at their back, I believe. So, to kick that ball out to midfield, stop them the next 16 seconds, keep them at a field goal range, kicking it into the wind. They must have done it because they were trying to think of how can we eliminate points. But their defense was playing good. It just,
you
to
punt
me, it
the
made
ball, you have about 10 seconds, you take a few seconds off the clock. That's what I assumed. But, like, have you ever seen anything like that? Like, it seemed to me that's where the game was won and lost.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I haven't seen anything. It was a terrible decision as far as I'm concerned. And yet Chris Jones said to the media that if he had the chance, he'd do it again. Even looking at the score, but that makes me even more concerned about, well, what is he thinking? Like he said, there's the risk to reward factor wasn't even close. 16 seconds, like, what do you expect is going to happen from that play? You're not going to gain anything from it. So you're way much better off just kicking the ball and stopping them with 10 more seconds left and going in tied at half.
If you don't want to give them 3,
worst case scenario, you give them 3 points.
Well, if you don't want to give them 3, then just go down for the safety.
Okay, well, how about this,
Take a knee and kick it away and give them 2.
I want to move on very quickly to Tony La Russa, one of the managers that was in the Hall of Fame along with Bobby Cox, several players like Glavin, Maddox, you name it. Great names, but I want to talk about Tony in particular because Tony La Russa benefited from the steroid era. He had Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco for a couple of years, not just Oakland. He had McGuire again in St. Louis. He had all these great seasons. Do you feel that there's a little bit of a double standard here and that La Russa should be tried as much as Mark McGuire is? Or at least Mark McGuire should be in the Hall as well?
Was Russa on steroids? Did he get?
But
Did he
he
get
would have
tested?
known. He would have known. And regardless, you are the benefactor of that.
I think it's a double standard for sure. I think Mark McGuire should be in. I mean, if they look at the steroid era, well, it's called the steroid era for a reason because 70% of guys were doing it. It wasn't against the rules. So, well, what do you expect is going to happen? And if Russa can be in there, well, why can't McGuire? Why can't Bonds? Why can't all those guys that they
So
keep
basically,
talking about?
Russa, if he's in,
didn't
McGuire
break
should be in.
any rules. As a
knew
coach,
that they did.
if you want to go to the gym and you want to work out this way, or you prepare yourself to the field, once you get in my clubhouse, then that's when I do what I.
But as a
what I
manager,
do.
you know what your players are doing. You can't be ignorant to that
I don't.
fact, right?
I guarantee you, those guys weren't doing it right out in front of the whole team.
But
Did he
but
turn a
he
blind eye?
knows.
Sure.
He turned a blind eye. He knows. And at the same time, Mark McGuire didn't break any rules either. And so why punish one and not the other? Especially if he knew what was happening, what was going on. I mean, just because he's a manager and not a player, I don't know.
You
All
can
right,
only
guys.
look after your own.
We're going to take a
your
quick
own
commercial break
reaction.
here. I understand that. But,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's so hard to manage. Like, where do you go from one end
Well,
to
then
the
your
other?
owner should get it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Where do you stop? Right?
Well, Major
Your
League
coach.
Baseball and Bud Selig. But
assistant
that's
coach,
neither
yeah.
here nor there, and that's my opinion. But we will take a quick commercial break. When we return, we will have Over Under next.